Welcome back to another Ladder Legends replay analysis. This time it is Ladder Legends Ithor going up against the 6K UED Demon fan? I don't even know. Ithor's question is, here's a replay. I tried to take up a 6K Protoss player. Felt I was doing fine until his maxed out Storm army marched across. Please focus on reviewing my unit composition. What units should I have built instead to hold this Storm push? All right, so essentially against Storm, you're going to need to have ultimately two answers. Either you're going to want to have Infestor Ultra, I guess eventually Broodlords, but those are far down the line. Let's not even talk about those in this video. But Infestor Ultra, or you're going to want to have Lurkers by the time he has it out. As a stopgap, you can make Banelings and defend with Banelings. So Lingsbanes with like a backbone of Hydras or Roaches, but this is going to be a more tenuous and control-based answer, and it's going to rely on you being very aggressive and choosing fights that you can back away from rather than getting hemmed into a corner. So Banelings are sort of an aggressive option that you can choose. Ultimately, we're looking to get into Lurkers as soon as possible. Most likely, or if we are already going down like the melee upgrades and we're getting into that sort of realm, we can be looking at going ultras but if we make ultras, remember we also need infestors on this patch for microbial orange cloud. So let's go ahead and see how this game goes, and we can start to look at kind of where we should have been scouting and deviating into this higher tech composition against Storm. One of the biggest things is going to be scouting that he is going for a Templar Archives and seeing that he's upgrading. And this is going to tell us we either need to make a decision, try to kill him pre-Storm or just when he barely gets Storm with a huge attack, or we need to posture with Banelings, or are we going to then try to go for a more Lycan composition? So that's going to be a very important aspect of ZVP, is scouting and making this crucial decision. One other thing, and I have pre-watched this a little bit, and I think we're going to get into this here, is it's possible that we will not be in a position to have the ability to scout and get into the tech we need to get into on time in order to deal with this Storm push based off of kind of just where we are in the game. And so if that's the case, even though the Storm is ultimately what kills us, it's important to know that like whenever we fall behind the power curve and are playing from behind. And so we'll try to identify that as well in this game. All right, so everything so far looks completely fine, no issues. One thing that I will note is that we are late on an Overlord here, so this Overlord should probably be made. You can make it as early as 24, but 25, 26, 27 probably at the latest. This Overlord right here, this Overlord needs to get made so that we are not getting supply blocked. This is going to lead to some ramifications here to where we're not able to cleanly... We do want to get a third base here at this point, so if we were able to get a third base out, it maybe will not end up being the absolute worst supply block in the world, but we definitely need the Overlord to be coming in now. So Overlord's finally coming in, and we're building for the base. So this may end up all kind of one issue. Okay, so the big issue here is we need to be pulling for the base early. So like when we start the base, it needs to not be over here. That being said, it does look like basically by the time you might have a better Overlord timing than I do here, because when we're a little bit late on this Overlord, so I'd say like at least at 30 we want this Overlord instead of I think we got it at 31, because technically we're like missing out on drone production here. We have all this larva. But overall, I would say that this is fairly clean. And even in terms of the Overlord timing, I guess even the 27 Overlord is a little bit early, and I might even start adjusting my Overlord to be 28, 29 here, maybe even 30. However, two issues. One is we need to make sure that we definitely can get our third down in order to make this happen, because otherwise, if we can't get the third down because he's pylon blocking us, immediately, we definitely want to have the ability to spin this larva into drones. So that's just something to consider as we consider this overlord timing. And then the other thing is, of course, this drone needs to be pulled, and it needs to be here to make this base when we have 300, not all the way back at the natural. Okay. This is just, I bring this up as just the kind of the first big, maybe, I guess, not even mistakes, although being late is a mistake, but the overtiming mistakes. But this is the first big point where your build is starting to have questions about whether or not we're scaling properly. So definitely something to put brain power. The first time you ever get to questions in whether or not your build is scaling properly, that's always useful to put time and effort into, because you will see the situation over and over again. So without prescribing anything, I will diagnose that, we could run into a situation where our overload's a bit late, where we're floating a bunch of larvae, and I'll also diagnose that, this third is going to be quite a bit later. So I'll leave it to you to figure out exactly how you want to address those. My suggestion would be a slightly earlier overlord, and then of course make sure we pull the drone on time.
You're under attack.
And this does get let's keep going. Okay, so we see there was I think an adept first, then we see a stalker. This does not preclude anything like a Stargate, as we see he is going Stargate, but you do know his Stargate was be slightly later. It makes it so that we really only need, like, even the 2 lings might be fine against the adept, because that's the only pressure that's coming across the map. If it's 2 adepts, you definitely need at least 6 lings, probably even 8. Oftentimes I find myself wanting 4 lings against Protoss to make sure we can kill the pylon efficiently if he tries to block the third, as well as we can efficiently deal with the adept if he just chooses to commit in with it. But 2 is completely fine. Here we kind of run into the same problem again of getting supply blocked. And again, this is where we probably need to be looking at getting... Now, since we have waited so long in order to make this overlord, and we're going to queue up, I believe we're queuing up a... let's see here. Yeah, a queen here. So we're going to jump to 34 supply, and then we're going to immediately spend this larva, which is 4 larvae, so that's 34... 36, 38, we're going to jump up to 38 supply immediately, and we're going to be jumping straight into a supply block. So if we are going to delay this overlord here, we're going to want to make sure that we make another overlord basically before this overlord even pops, so that once we finish spending all of this money, we're not going to just jump straight into a supply block again.
Your forces are taking damage.
So 1 overlord, then we make 2 overlords here. I'd probably even be a fan of 3 overlords here, because now that we've hit another supply block, we're going to run into the same issue again, where once we get unsupply blocked, we're going to spend all of our larvae again, and we're going to start jumping up. It might be early enough that only 2 overlords is sufficient here, but like as you start getting higher or later in the game time, higher in the drone counts, more larvae, we have double injects running. You start to get to the point where even, when you get supply blocked, even making 2 overlords is not enough, and you really want to make 3 overlords. This is a problem that I dealt with myself, and it's one that you just have to bite the bullet on. So we see here, yeah, we're already at 47, and we're basically at a supply block again, and then another overlord finishes, and we're at a supply block again. So the reason that this is important in discussion to how do we deal, what unit composition do we go to, do we make in response to Storm, is this base part of our gameplay is going to be, this is where we're droning, we're getting up the drone count to get the tech that's going to be necessary to deal with Storm. In which case, we're going, let's just say that Lurkers is what we want to choose upon in order to deal with Storm, then that means we need Hive. Hive means we need 5 gases, we need, 90 drones, or at least 80 drones. Like, we need a lot of drones in order to support Hive tech. And right now is where we're like getting or not getting those drones. Everything looks good with the Roach Warren. This is just something to keep in mind. I know we're trying to focus on unit compositions, but again, we're going to start losing things that keep us safe and allow us to get those higher drones up. So we never want to have queens chilling by themselves. The queens should be probably at this point together and back in should be back together, should be back together and like defending the mineral line, and definitely, you know, shouldn't be out by themselves. So at the very least, this queen should be up here. But then you really wouldn't like that because what if the Oracle came in here? So ultimately, this queen needs to drop the tumor and come back immediately and chill here. And these sorts of snowballs where we start losing these little itty bitty things, this is where we start to destabilize and we start to fall behind and not be able to have those drone counts out safely. So now we're going to have to either accept that we're a little bit unsafe, or we're going to have to kind of make that queen again, both of which are unattractive options.
Your forces are under attack. A new queen has emerged. Our drones are
Okay.
under attack.
So now we're starting to like float a bunch of larvae. Partially, we're just not spending this larva, I think. Let's go ahead and take a look at, like, see if we can identify root cause. Because we often see we have tons of larvae. Let's just try to identify the root cause. And again, this is going to go towards building the drone count that supports the lurkers that we need to support the, to counter the eventual size storm. Okay, we're spending larvae, we're out of money. This is good. But see, here we're getting kind of caught up. This is good moves. We want to do this, but we don't want to focus on this. While we're doing this, we need to be still like tabbing back to our hatcheries and spinning the larvae here. Actually, sorry, I was looking at him. Okay, so we spin the larva. Good. What are we doing here? Dropping a bane nest. It's okay to drop the bane nest, but like this, let's get in the this is kind of the same as the third. We want to spend larva, and then we come here and like we know we want to drop a bane nest, but we want to take a drone and move it to where we want to drop the bane nest and spin the larva before. And then it gets there, and then we spin the larva. So like we should have not enough minerals to make the bane nest when the drone arrives. Then we get 100 minerals and we immediately spend it on the bane nest. And then we go, this is how much we should be spending larva and really building up that solid drone count. Because right now, because we're sort of like neglecting the frequency with which we need to spend larva, this is how we're eventually going to start floating more and more money. And then here we sort of run into a supply block again. These supply blocks too at this point will start to work them as you get more and more used to spinning larvae like immediately. That's when you can start to work these supply blocks out even as you get higher and higher in resources, because you start to notice how much you need to be unsupply blocked so that you can actually spin your larva. Here, this is definitely the point where we want to be. By the time we get to like the 68 supply block, we don't want to be making just 2 overlords. We want to be making at least 3 overlords, maybe even 4, especially if we think we might be needing to make roaches. You might even need like 5 overlords if you think you might need to start making roaches. Laser actually used to make like laser would frequently be like 90 out of like 180 supply, and dude was 6.6k doing that. So definitely do not be afraid of overmaking overlord. It's the lesser of the evils for sure. And so now the big issue too is like we're on, we take the 4 bases, but we're not actually saturating the 4th bases, and it's starting to compound. Issues are starting to compound with being supply blocked and not having the units out fast enough. If we notice, he doesn't really have like anything, like he's gotten away with a lot of greed, and then he's just adding on a bunch of gateways later. So we need to be matching, we either need to be killing him, which is not ever advisable to try to kill a Protoss. We need to be matching his levels of greed. Probably this base should already be saturated, and we should have a 5th base on the way. And then we're sort of getting to the place too where we want to be like overseer scouting pretty much constantly, like always be going in for overseer scouts. And if we do that, we would see that he's got a fleet beacon, which is its whole other thing. I'm going to ignore that since we weren't talking about it. Ultimately, this fleet beacon, you don't really want to be making hydras against this. I don't know if I have really good answers for you on the fleet beacon. Probably, I mean, I think you're going to be wanting to get into Spire, but you obviously don't want to overmake Corruptors if he's primarily going ground. So tough fleet beacon, good unit. Mothership, good unit. Would say that it does very good against Hydras and Hydras only. However, you can't overmake corruptors, so you got to find a way to balance that. And I don't have good answers for you, honestly. When I do, I'll let you know. Okay. So we come in and kind of at this point we're pretty low. We have a bunch of money in the bank, and we're also just theoretically lower. We should be almost maxed out on any composition, especially if it's like a roach based composition. So we're just way under supply what we should be here, and that causes us to have to abandon the space. And we don't even have another base to like fall back onto. So this is going to like greatly inhibit our gas. So we're just going to have a very hard time actually being at the hive count, at the gas count we need to get the hive tech to properly deal with Psystorm. So in this case, since we already have the Bane Nest, we know that with this, I would just consider ourselves all in at this point and start trying to hit super maxed out, very aggressive, try to look for trades and try to actually end the opponent. Obviously, once we deal with this, which we do. So consider yourself all in here, which means we're trying to snowball the opponent, which means you know, just keep making stuff and only take good fights. The one thing here is like you should always, we have the Bane Nest, which is great. We have Bane Speed, so we should start to assume he's going to start making Zealots, which Banelings are good against, or maybe even doing Storm. Like we can kind of guess that he's going to be doing this Storm thing here in this case. One thing we should be doing if we're better is we should be overseer scouting kind of constantly, and like at some point we should pick up that he is getting a Templar Archives and getting this Psystorm upgrade. You can see it's researching. Then you know for a fact you need Banelings, but you can probably just intuit that you want Banelings. You're all in and you need Banelings anyway. So at this point we should probably be making nothing but Lings and massing up a force and maybe trying to start to do like little fights here or there, like pull them apart, but then like really start to try to like hit this base, start to try to like overwhelm him here, all these sorts of things. Ideally hitting before Storm. So let's see. We kind of do this. The problem is we actually waste time going to a base he doesn't even have, and this is very much because we have not been scouting with an Overseer. Also, you should always keep a pack of Lings around and scout just so you can sort of see, because had we known that this base was actually the base that was that he had, we probably could have started to attack and overwhelm this base before he starts to get these defenses online. And then I'm starting to like our position and our ability to actually execute the all-in a lot more. But we go to the wrong place. And so I kind of, to go back to the unit composition question, in this game, I would counter Psystorm, one, by attacking before Psystorm was finished, because he puts us in a situation where we're all in. And two, then I would like continue by making Banelings and trying to like take very, very good fights. And all of that needs to be supported by having good scouting and good map vision of where he is, and then recognizing the game state they're in and understanding that our only hope to win this game at this point is like snowballing. So I initially said Lurkers and Ultras, which I agree with still, but in the game state that we're in, even though we're at 90 drones, we need to understand that our gas has been limited so long, we need to do critical damage. Even if once we're done all-inning, it's interesting. You're in the mindset that you're all in. You need to maybe snowballing is the word I've started to use more. You need to snowball attacks to where you gain the advantage. Once you gain an advantage, you can continue to try to snowball if you think you can, or you could back off and then go into the Lurkers. But at the moment now, we kind of need to get damage done to him to slow him down, to get ourselves back into the game. And here we're just kind of headbutting him here. This is nice damage. It's okay damage. But again, now that we've done this damage, we still are nowhere close to like a proper counter to this technology. So we're probably going to need to be relying on Banelings. And like ideally, if we can compel him to attack into us on creep, and we can like take it from multiple different angles, the Banelings could be a decent way to like. We need to snowball one more fight with inferior tech, which is going to be the Banelings, which are inferior, but still like maybe they can do okay if we take a good fight. We need to snowball one more fight with inferior tech. Generally speaking, just angles. So even with the army we have, more angles is better than one angle. But then that also assumes that we can actually compel him to attack into us, which he doesn't need to do. He might feel he needs to do now, but he doesn't really need to do. So we'll see what actually ends up happening. So here we probably it's too much. Like I would again be trying to scout and instead of going for the established base that's been mining, like we'd be much better to rotate to this new base and try to cancel that. If we cancel this base, all of a sudden he might actually feel the need to actually be a little bit more aggressive and like he's starting to feel the pressure a bit more. So again, fight selection and figuring out like using scouting to figure out where we want to be fighting. Changelings are great at this as well. As overseers. So overseers and changelings, great units to counter storm in the sense that you can see where the storm is and try to fight where he is not and where he's not established yet. Because what we want to do with these units is we don't want to trade on his side of the map like kind of, I mean, evenish trades. We don't really want, we need really good trades, and to get that we need him to be feeling compelled to attack us on creep. So like this is not it. In fact, it wasn't even that good of a trade. But like if we were to rotate over here using the creep quickly and come up here, hit the base and run back, now we could have compelled him into attacking us, potentially. The Banelings are good here, but we've already taken the fight pretty poorly. We do manage to max out, but the problem is he's just in a much better... Notice he's actually very, very low on minerals. He doesn't have a lot of bank. So these bases actually going up were actually pretty big lifelines for him. Like he needed both these bases to be established pretty quickly in order to like continue to stay even in the game. And so... yeah, and we keep doing this where now he's not actually feeling compelled to attack into us until he has actually established these bases and he's got a big bank. And now it's going to be a very different situation when he does decide to attack us. Before, he's going to not feel pressed to come in very much. He is going to be able to take it slow. He's not going to, rush forward into like Banelings on creep, like would need to happen for us to take a good fight. We lose all of our Banelings and our fighting, and then he takes this opportunity to attack us. And when he does finally come onto creep, not only is he in a much better situation where he doesn't have to like go very quickly at all, we also don't have any Banelings to actually try to capitalize because we have to remake those lings. So very, very valiant attempt. Ultimately, we got ourselves behind. So one thing we should be working on is figuring out how to not get ourselves behind. But then the second thing we should be looking at too is when we are behind and we need to like figure out, okay, we need to have very good awareness of where his army is, where his new bases are, where his weak points are. We need to try to snowball interactions where we don't lose any units and we do damage to him, that doesn't necessarily kill him, but at the very least flips the script to where we're ready to receive him with a fully maxed out army with Banelings on creep with a good concave, and then we can wipe his army once, and then all of a sudden, I won't lie to you, the game may not be over. Maybe in the hands of a master, Cyril, the game is over, but like there's probably still a lot of game to play from that point, but at the very least you can get your tech out, you can be even. One note is that, just along the two, by the time that he gets Tempest out, then like the lurkers become a lot worse. So at that point, like especially with the upgrades that we're choosing, we probably want to be going, if we're playing for this objective, we'd probably still be teching towards ultras over lurkers, because the ultras just have a bit more survivability against like a Tempest based army in terms of usefulness. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed that, then please consider subscribing at Ladder Legends, and you too can have your replays analyzed. Thanks. Have a great day.